Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It is 8:58 a.m. This is News and Views on Salam Media. Our next guest is on standby, but before we cross over to him, he's based in the Western Cape. Let me just remind our listeners that the next hour of News and Views right here on Salam Media is sponsored by Africa Muslims Agency. Africa Muslims Agency, a beacon of hope to communities for over 35 years and above in Africa and beyond. We're now going to be talking with Professor Usuf Chikte. He is with the PSC. He is, in fact, the PSC coordinator based in the Western Cape, and we're going to be talking about something that's a bit worrisome. But of course, once again, it's a Zionist tactic, and we're going to see how we're going to get around this one. We understand that Zionists are now using South African courts to silence activists. Could you be next? I kind of think that I might be next, Professor, simply because I've now started using, I don't refer to apartheid Israel any longer as that. I'm now referring to them as Nazi Israel. So I might come unstuck. Assalamu alaikum to you. Welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam. Julie, I think the first thing to note here that today's news is about the genocide, the apartheid, and the Holocaust of the Palestinians. Let us not get distracted from that. The bombing and the siege of Gaza, and particularly northern Gaza, the United Nations Security Council discussing urgently the famine because the Israelis are blocking food into the area, the bombing of Lebanon and Syria. That is the story. And we must not get distracted by the antics of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, the Cape one in this case, to divert us, to distract us, and to digress from the horror that is being committed, which they aid and abet, and in which they are complicit in. That is what they're doing. We've noticed recently what they have done in Amsterdam, inverting the truth where they perpetrate the violence and the horror and heinous crimes and then proclaim themselves as victim. Violence in South Africa, hate speech in South Africa is a serious issue. We know that. We've faced over 400 years of that through the colonialism that is expressed here. The privileged classes in South Africa, which includes the South African Zionist Federation, are not the victims of hate speech. The victims of hate speech, especially if we go into 60 days of activism and violence, are those who have been disfranchised before, the blacks, the women, especially in rural areas, not the likes of the South African Zionist Federation or the African Jewish Board of Deputies, as the Cape claims. Their claims are patently false. It's manufactured. When they were pressed to ask, well, how can you claim 300% increase? They were hiding behind all kinds of secretive things, saying that it's a Popper Act, it's their information that they've gathered, and so on. Now we know Israelism, as part of the Israelism agenda, they lie, and they lie. Right? They don't have any more teeth to lie through. That is how much they lie. So we can take this as a manufactured event. Clearly, in the case of 300%, they're unable to justify, they're unable to say this is how they collected the information. We know that the Hasbara manufactures these kinds of events, as they've done it everywhere else in the world. But the portrayal of themselves as victims is the shield, right? And they want to manufacture, they manufacture racism, anti-Semitism, and they use it as a moral alibi to shield themselves from criticism, to shield Israel from criticism, and to shield Zionism from criticism, and for us to hold them into account. So let's not get embroiled in the mischief that they are conducting. Seriously.
However, however, Professor, we do need to be aware because there is a case which we won't go into detail, but there is a case possibly going to be heard in Cape Town, in the courts in Cape Town, against a Muslim lady who has been targeted in this instance by the South African Jewish Board of Deputies in as you've indicated, the Cape Town branch. And they've made some sort of a ludicrous demand that she needs to apologize publicly to them, to the Jewish people, or to the Zionist entity, and also pay them an amount of 25,000 rands to settle that supposed defamation claim. How do you see all of this playing out? And I also made a statement when I introduced you earlier on, saying that I've started using the word Nazi Israel. Situations like that, when journalists use this type of language, are they opening themselves up in this situation? As we know, these people lie, the Zionists lie, through their teeth. Could they trump up charges against me or any other person that uses this type of language, which is in fact the truth? This is what they're doing. So how does this then, or how would something like this stand up in a court of law?
Well, if those who are perpetrating a genocide and a Holocaust against Palestinians don't want to be called Nazis, then they mustn't act like Nazis. They mustn't
Ah,
bomb the hospitals. They mustn't burn the tents. They mustn't incinerate patients still with drip feeds in their hands and in their arms. Then they mustn't pulverize. They mustn't participate in ethnic cleansing. They mustn't annex other people's properties and lands as they've done in Gaza. Now, only recently, yesterday, Smotrich announced that he's going to annex the West Bank. They've annexed the Golan Heights. Then they mustn't practice an apartheid. Then they mustn't proclaim that they are a nation state of Jews and Jews alone, which is manifest of an Herrenvolkism, of a supremacy, of an exclusivity, of an apartheid, and of a privileged position which akins to the horrid and hideous laws that Germany introduced during the just prior to the Second World War. Then that is what they must do. And, even if it's illegal, even if the courts find it illegal, the courts, that slavery was illegal. Slavery was legal once upon a time, and it was prohibited to fight against slavery. Apartheid was illegal once upon a time. Legal once upon a time. Colonialism was illegal once upon a time, and we fought against this. So we must fight against the idea that Nazism can resurface, fascism can resurface, and we are being proscribed from saying it what it is.
Let's talk. You alluded to the 16 days of activism, which we're going to be observing here in South Africa. It's no violence against women and children and helpless people, obviously. And I kind of think about the hypocrisy around the 16 days, because we have a large group of Zionists in South Africa as well. And undoubtedly, they're going to be holding up the flag of 16 days of activism. How, you can't even
Six,
begin.
yeah, 16 days of violence is not, what the Palestinian issue does. It reflects on what is taking place here in South Africa. The violence and murder and killing perpetrated against women and children in its most hideous form is practiced in Palestine by the Israelis. 17 from over close to 50,000 dead, hundreds and 100,000 injured. Mostly the dead are mostly women and children. 17,000 children killed. the age category in which most of the children are killed are, they say, between 4 and 9. And this is the violence. It would be an act of hypocrisy on the part of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies or anyone else to ignore that and to speak about the kinds of things that are taking place in South Africa. But they are not a victim group in South Africa. They are a privileged group. They supported apartheid. They are continuing to support apartheid in Israel. And to say the incidents that they are mentioning in Cape Town against a woman who was formerly disfranchised in South Africa, who is suffering the consequences of apartheid, they are arranging all their forces against her to silence her, to stop her from expressing an opposition to the genocide over there. And that is the situation. You have a white male at the head of the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, the Cape Town branch. I mean, what kind of moral right does he have to tell a woman with a background of colonialism, slavery, segregation, and apartheid, who has experienced intergenerational forms of discrimination? What right does this privileged person has to accuse her of racism of any sort? Throughout her life, her generation, her groups have fought against apartheid. And this person who is making the accusation, throughout their lives, they have promoted apartheid and they've promoted genocide. So it's this inversion which doesn't make sense at all. And we must call him out. We must call out the African Jewish Board of Deputies. We mustn't allow them to conflict the genocide and the Holocaust and then Nazi-like attacks on the Palestinians. We mustn't allow them to dictate the terms of the debate, and we are protected in the Constitution when it comes to freedom of speech and freedom of expression around that. They want to paint themselves as victims, the eternal victims. They are not victims. They are the perpetrators of hate speech. Look what they've done. There's a consistent pattern in terms of the attacks. If they want, they recruit. It's from their ranks that they recruit people into the Israeli occupation forces. It's from their ranks that they stand there and attack in terms of the organizations protesting against the genocide and calling for a ceasefire and calling for aid to be given to the starving population in Gaza. This is what it's from their ranks that they support people through the JNF, the Jewish National Fund, and supporting the Israeli army in several ways. And we are boycotting those institutions because they are support the genocide, not because of anything else. And they support genocides because they believe in an ethno-nationalist, messianic ideology called Zionism, and they conflict Zionism with Judaism. And we've all made it very clear in the Palestinian Solidarity Organization that we are not opposed to Judaism. We are not opposed to Jews. We don't propagate hatred against Jews or anybody else. What we are against is Zionism. What we are against is the perpetration of a genocide, the bombing of women and children, the starvation of people, the ethno-cleansing of people. And anybody in South Africa who supports that, we will boycott them. Not because, and if they happen to be Jews, that is a different matter, but we don't do it because they are Jews. We do it because they are supporting a Nazi-like ethnic cleansing Holocaust that is taking place. And if you don't want to be labeled as aiding and abetting the genocide, then don't commit and support the genocide. Don't stop us from saying that, because you cannot do
Okay.
it.
You actually just answered my next question, because I was going to ask you about this whole conflation between Semitism and Zionism, but you have answered it, so thank you very much. Let's end off here. I've got a couple of comments from someone called Sentiski Fortinine or 49. I hope I'm saying that properly. The question is as follows: Is the Israeli shekel, the money, of course, is the Israeli shekel still legal tender in Palestine today? What's left of Palestine, I just wonder. Okay, let me read that again. Is the Israeli shekel still legal tender in Palestine today? The shekel is a shackle. Shekel spelled S-H-E and shackle S-H-A. So you get the drift, don't you, Professor? Same
Yeah.
with any other monopoly. End global apartheid. And that's a comment by Sentiski Fortunin. Your comments on that?
Yeah, no, the currency in occupied Palestine is the
If there
shekel.
is anything left.
The currency is the shekel, and they need to trade in there. And we know from the documents that we've seen how the banks were raided by the Israeli occupation forces in Ramallah and in other places, how the Israeli army steals children's piggy banks and jewelry from houses that they bombed. So yes, the shekel is the legal tender in that part of the world.
Sad to say, yeah, when you talk about how the Nazi IDF soldiers go into homes and raid it and steal it, I've seen footage, video footage, on how they've stolen jewelry and displaying it and showing off about it and displaying it as well. Be that as it may, we do need to wrap up now. Your closing thoughts. Is the lady in question the social influencer in the Western Cape who's had these charges brought against her regarding um, anti-Semitism? I presume she's getting a lot of support by your organization and many like yourself in the Western Cape and
Mm.
throughout South Africa, because this matter is going to court, or is probably already being heard in court.
Yeah, no, there is a tremendous amount of support from the community, from lay people, and a revulsion against the South African Zionist network and the African Jewish Board of Deputies. We have laid the charges, the assault on our freedom of expression, the attempt to silence us because we show empathy for those who are being starved to death in Palestine. So there is that outpouring of support, and we believe that that the person, that the charges are devoid, are manufactured, are devoid of any substance, and that and there are many people who are willing to defend her and who are defending her right to the hilt. Thank you very much.
Professor, I'm going to digress here. My final question to you, if you don't mind, please. I spoke to someone from the Colored People's Congress yesterday, and it's not the first time that I'm hearing the story. And the narrative is that Israeli citizens and Zionists are creating two cities, two cities within the Western Cape. It's, Little Israel, as it's being now dubbed. And then the people in the Cape Flats, that story is totally different. They're not getting services. Um, they're not getting essential services, number one. And it's now become almost an apartheid little state here in South Africa. Your thoughts on that
Yeah.
matter?
Yeah, the racialized inequalities in terms of locations and group areas are deeply entrenched in South Africa. And there is an attempt to entrench it further on the part of the Zionist groups operating in South Africa. we are made to feel very unwelcome. Those of us who come from the suburbia of the Cape Flats and from the locations of the Cape Flats and the group areas of the Cape Flats, there is surveillance taking place, supported by the city of Cape Town. There is monitoring taking place. There have been several attacks on people who have dressed up in Palestinian paraphernalia, scarves and so on. You know of the incident where there was a protest at the Sanlam Marathon last year where a person was assaulted. Another person had the card scratched because of a Zionist being not liking her expression of who she is and her identity around here. There's been assault in Simonstown that is at the courts at the moment because of an expression of support for pro-Israel. So the apartheid discrimination that people are facing is taking on a heightened form, coupled with an anti-Palestinianism, an anti-Arabism, and an anti-Muslim Islamophobic content driven by the Zionists in Cape Town and the rest of South Africa. I mean, we have heard of the killing of a pro-Palestinian supporter in Durban, inspired by Zionist ideology. So that is one of the things that is taking place. We've also had attacks on the leadership of Muslim groups and Palestinian groups, and fake and manufactured attempts to smear them with anti-Semitic slurs, and including, by the way, our supporters who happen to be Jewish. They're also not exempt from such attacks. And more recently, one of the philanthropists in South Africa, one of the most well-known philanthropists in South Africa, has been slurred, has been smeared, has been attacked because of his position on humanity, because of his position on against the genocide and against the starvation and against the refusal of the Zionist forces to provide medication and food to the starving population, and which he tried to assist.
And we're going to leave it there. And I do know who you're alluding to there, our very own special Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, and the entire community and most of South Africa has come out in his support and total defense. How dare they? How dare they even attack a man of the highest of integrity? But be that as it may, always a pleasure talking with you, Professor Usuf Chikte, and very comforted to hear that the young lady that's been targeted in the Western Cape by these anti-Semitic supposed slurs is being supported by pro-Palestinians in the Western Cape. Jazakallah so much for your time. Always a pleasure talking with you. Till the next time, Assalamu alaikum to you.
Wa alaikum salam, and my best wishes to you and your listeners. Thank you.
That was Professor Usuf Chikte, the coordinator of PSC. Very outspoken, very balanced, and an absolute pleasure to interact with. We need to move on now. It is 9:22 a.m. And next, we're going to be talking about a very worrying situation here in South Africa, and that, of course, is the issue around children buying snacks from spaza shops, and then a lot of them becoming violently ill, and then some of them have even lost their lives in the process. What has the government done about it? Are the people happy with government's action regarding this matter? Well, we're going to unpack that in a minute or two with Mampapatla Madikoto. Please stay with us.
We are here in the middle of a Zahra neighborhood. The whole neighborhood is already destroyed. More than 17 towers are down. Here, as you can see, the firefighters trying their best to help. The people are still under the rubble. A lot of the people
Join Hamza on his exclusive South African tour as he shares his personal experiences, never-before-seen footage, and powerful insights on the ongoing genocide in Gaza. This is more than just a talk. It's an invitation to witness Gaza through the lens of Hamza Sha'alan. Don't miss this opportunity to meet the photojournalist who brought Gaza's pain and perseverance to the world in its darkest moments. Follow Salam Media on social media pages for more on this tour and be part of the